Well, the NFL Combine, that wonderful assortment of male lingerie with shuttle drills and 40-yard dashes has come and gone. And our good friend Lloyd Vance has been all over, watching everything from the scintillating shuttle drill through the 40-yard dash, my friend. Let me ask you, who really stood out? Was there one overwhelming performance, and not necessarily by uh position, but just by player who stood out?
Well, there was a contingent of players, Mark, that you're like, wow, maybe they're track guys or what, but they've really been preparing a lot of these young guys I talked to. They're in Florida, they're in Arizona, they're out in California, getting ready for these specific drills, and a lot of them were ready. So there are 319 players invited to the NFL Combine out in Indianapolis. It started on February 23rd, ended on March 2nd. And yeah, Central Florida defensive end Malachi Lawrence. I mean, he's 6'4", 253. You look at the length on him, he's like prototypical pass rusher. So everybody's drooling over this young man, 4.52 and a 40, uh, 40-inch vertical. And he has some of the stats to back it up, which is good. You always want to see that. You just want to see a guy that kind of comes there and you're like, oh, okay. He had 14 TFLs last year, 7 sacks. They're projecting him now, possibly late day one, early day two type pick. Obviously, the Ohio State players were just tremendous. And then everybody's talking about Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State. He ran a 4.46 40, 43 and a half vertical. Originally came in about a top 25 type player. Now they're talking about top five. And then in terms of, some of the bigger names, the quarterbacks, everybody was watching them, and everybody's talking about Talon Green from Arkansas in terms of his speed and his work in the drills. 4.36 40. The thing is, you got to watch his passing, though. You know what I mean? His passing wasn't the best. Uh, and, back in the day, I still remember some of the quarterbacks that I talked to when I did third and mile. Some of the black quarterbacks, they said, don't do too well in these running events and this and that. We'll see if he's a conversion candidate or if he's going to be like a Jalen Milrow, um, who kind of sat on the bench for Seattle Seahawks, and they're kind of working his way through. But
Roger.
Talon Green, very athletic quarterback. We'll see how he does. Uh, and then Sonny Styles' brother was crazy. Safety from Ohio State, Lorenzo Styles. He was just as dynamic for it at the combine at 4.27 in the 40. So there's some of the guys that shine. But yeah, there was a lot of players that went there, and Fernando Mendoza, the top guy, is perceived to go to the Raiders. He did not work out, but he did very good in his interviews, worked the room, and it's just the NFL convention out there.
You know something? I'm glad that you brought that Mendoza thing up, because there were some headlines coming out of there about a scout, and I guess he was making a joke. But when you're dealing with a Hispanic quarterback and you tell him, maybe you could go out and get arrested uh, to keep you from moving up or being number one on the charts. I mean, what do you make of that type of statement? Was that just an overblown joke, or is that just somebody who's insensitive and just doesn't get the climate of the times?
He does not get the climate at times. You can't talk that way to these young men anymore. And it's interesting, Mark, because recently it came out the interview process they've had to change in terms of the NFL Combine and when to get these young guys in a room and what questions they can ask, because some of these scouts and front office people were asking borderline offensive questions to some of these young men, and it's just a different day and age. And yeah, you don't like to see stuff like that. And let's face it, he's going to the Raiders. It may not be ideal, but hey, Kubiak's going to be there. Tom Brady is involved with that organization. And John Spytek, the general manager there, is moving in a new direction. So it could be a good landing spot for him.
That's Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, as we look back at the NFL Combine, the Underwear Olympics, as we continue here on the program. I wanted to talk indeed about Jeremiah Love, because by position, oftentimes in the first round, you want to look a little farther down before you try to find a running back. But if what I saw and what I had been reading, and granted, I had been immersed a great deal in covering the CIAA tournament, but if what I heard to be the case, what his performance was, I mean, this guy could be an all-world back. This guy could be something that's a franchise changer. Uh, Talk about what's being said, and do you think he could be a top five pick?
When you talk about Jeremiah Love coming out of Notre Dame at 6 foot, 212 pounds, I mean, he's a dynamic player, Mark. We watched him all season. They're on NBC, so everybody gets to watch him. But when you saw him at the combine, it was like, wow, this guy's at a level that people did not think he was at. He ran a 4.3640, extremely good in the field drills. That's what I really like in terms of the combine. They're getting out there with a position coach. They're doing, bag drills and agility tests. And that's what you really want to see rather than, a eye popping 40 or vertical. In terms of his position, I mean, he has great footwork. And now I thought he was more like a Saquon Barkley type when he was coming out, but he may be more like a Jahmyr Gibbs, Mark. And that's the latest guy in terms of dual threat in the National Football League, a guy that's a home run hitter, you can take it to the house any play. And I think that's what you see with Jeremiah Love. So he's definitely in a top 10 conversation. He's going to be the first running back off the board.
And I don't know if Adam Peters is listening, but that's been my man crush to Washington since the season. Watching him, he's an explosive, dynamic player, man. I mean, they just don't come like that too often. In terms of position, when you look at the amount of talent in the draft, what would you say is the deepest position this year?
Back a real quick. You may have to move up, Mark, because I have him mocked right now going to the Kansas City Chiefs at number 9. Here, I can see Andy Reid taking him and putting him in
Mm-hmm.
that offense. They need a running back, so we'll see. Uh, in terms of position, I mean, there's a lot of great position. Quarterback is the marquee position, but it's Mendoza, and there's not much else there. So you have Simpson, maybe from Alabama, that may sneak in the first round. But that edge position that I talked about earlier with Lawrence, when talking about, you know, the results from the combine, everybody's trying to get that pass rusher. And you have Arvell Reese, edge out of Ohio State, 6'4", 238. He had
Right.
69 tackles last year, 6.5 sacks. He's up there. He didn't really work out at the combine, but he didn't need to. I
Right.
think he's going to go maybe to the Jets as a second overall pick. And then David Bailey, an edge out of Texas Tech, 6'3", 250, 14 and a half sacks last year. He's a guy everybody's talking about. And then other positions are offensive tackle is big in this draft. You want a guy that can rush the passer, but you have to have those big guys up front that can protect. And you have Francis Cece Maalaga coming out of Miami. He's offensive tackle. He shoots. He's 6'6", 315. I've been following him since he was at IMG Academy. He only allowed 2 sacks last season. He's a guy you got to keep your eye on. Spencer Fanu from Utah. He worked out at the combine to his credit. Big, long, offensive tackle, 6'6", 310. Had 11 starts at left tackle and 13 at right tackle. So he may be able to be a swing guy, and now have to figure out where he's going to be. And then the other position that shines, I think, in this draft is wide receiver, because you have to have that guy that can catch the football. There's a couple names I'll throw at you. Carnell Tate from Ohio State. He has that good size, 6'2", 190. Last year, he didn't have
Is he a
eye-popping
legacy?
numbers.
Is he related to the former Steelers defensive back?
Interesting. I'd have to look that up. You're
That's
thinking
an
of
interesting.
Carnell Lake. You're thinking of Carnell Lake. So
Right.
his son's actually on the Rams, but this
Okay.
is Carnell Tate. So
Ah. Okay.
he's living up to that Ohio State pedigree. You
Mm-hmm.
saw JSN this year. Chris Olave's out there, so he's one of the latest Ohio State receivers to come out, and they're mocking him actually. He may go 7 to Washington. So you're gonna have to keep your eye on that if they want to go in that direction. Jordan Tyson from Arizona State. A lot of people are high on him in terms of receiver position. 6'2", 200 pounds. He had 8 touchdowns last year. Um, so there's some of the names, and obviously we talked about the first running back off the board is going to be Love. And then from that Miami team, and it's interesting, Mark, because we saw a lot of these teams in the playoffs, but
Right.
from the Miami team, everybody's talking about Ruben Bain, their edge, may not have prototypical arm length or whatever that they're looking
Yeah,
at,
now
but
see that's
yeah.
you stole my thunder. That's what I was going to ask you about. We've seen him do work with those same size arms in big moments in big games and be dominant, but then you're going to penalize him because his arms aren't long enough. How does that work?
I sometimes I don't understand, but we'll see how it goes in terms of arm length and all that, and some of the guys just aren't prototypical. They're just going to get it done. You think of a John Randall type.
Right.
He didn't have the perfect body type, but he had that suddenness, that quickness, and he knew how to get to the quarterback. Chris Dolman, same type of thing. Another guy may have been a little undersized, but he knew how to get to the quarterback. So Ruben Bain, 8.5 sacks last year, explosive player. I think he definitely is going to go top 10, and these are the positions everybody's looking at. So these are the premium ones. Obviously, the quarterback thing is, that's where they're going to point the finger as this is a marquee drafter. And next year, though,
Yeah, I
I'm
was
hearing, Mark, some teams may be looking towards next year already in 2027 draft.
not thinking about going into the season with a tanking strategy, are they? I mean,
It's
because we all
crazy.
know
Some
that.
people are talking about that NBA mentality in the NFL. We'll see if it
Really?
works out because 2027, I mean, you have Arch Manning coming out of Texas. You have Trinidad Chambliss, who went back to Ole Miss. He's there. Dante Moore out of Oregon. He's probably coming out next year. Um, Lenore Sellers out South Carolina. I could go on and on. And then at receiver position, everybody likes that. Ryan Williams from Alabama, and then Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. They're all underclassmen, and people expect to come out next year. But right now, you mock the 2026 draft and then kind of see. But I always say it takes 2 to 3 years to evaluate a draft, but you want to have young guys step in and make an impact because you did see some players on the Seattle Seahawks that were on the younger side, like Nick Emmanwori, their safety. He played very well for them as a rookie.
And this is one of those things where this is the where you build a foundation of your future. And a couple teams that stick out to me right now, and I'm interested to see what the vibe is with the Giants. You probably do need to get a running back, and I heard a rumor afloat that perhaps that would be the way that John Harbaugh is looking with Jeremiah Love. Could you see him fitting in the Big Apple?
That's going to be interesting. They have Scottaboo sitting there, and they have some options. Obviously, everybody's always going to talk about the Giants need offensive line help.
Mm-hmm.
They have their quarterback, and there were times where he's running for his life out there. But you know, um, maybe they go defense again. Harbaugh's a guy. Uh, he loved Ed Reed. He played well for them. Kyle Hamilton for him with the Ravens. And you got Caleb Downs sitting there from the Ohio State. He's a big time player. 10 interceptions last year. 6 foot 205 can play in a box, can also drop. So he may be somebody looking at, but they're going to have their options at 5. So they're going to probably just wait and see what falls to them. So as we said, they need offensive line help. They need defensive back help. And then receiver, you got to see how Neighbors comes back from that injury and Scatterbu as well in running back position.
So I guess we're approaching the start of the official league year, right?
The official league year will kick off on March 11th.
Okay.
And you're seeing teams kind of, jockey, getting ready, because the salary cap is going to be over 300 million for the first time around the
Wow.
National Football League. So teams are going to have money to spend, but a lot of them are releasing players and just getting ready. Like you just seen the Chiefs are getting ready to cut Jawan Taylor, a high price tackle, and you're going to see you may see some of these quarterbacks hit the street, like Kyler Murray,
Mm-hmm.
Tua Tagovailoa, they make a lot of money, and they're going to affect their salary cap of their team.
All right, back on the other side, we'll talk about some of the transactions that might be going down as we head towards the start of the league year, which happens right after the combine. The NFL drama, baby, on and off the field. It's the best reality show on television year round. That's my guy, Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, coming back on the other side as we continue. It's OG Sports Wrap on Sports Wrap Network and Substack. Remember, we all we got.